Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
We are continuing today with our literature unit for the month of January. And remember, our featured novel is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And last time we summarized the story, it's all about these four sisters growing up in New England.
Yeah, in Massachusetts, a state that's the eastern part of America.
So today we're going to actually talk about the author herself, Louisa May Alcott. So let's get to it. Let's talk about her life and times. Let's read the entire lesson right now. Louisa May Alcott was born in Pennsylvania, U.S. in 1832 and grew up near Concord, Massachusetts. Her father, Amos Bronson Alcott, was a philosopher and educator who belonged to the Transcendentalist movement. Through her father's connections, Louisa received her education from many of the leading thinkers and writers of the time, including Ralph Waldo Emerson, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Margaret Fuller, and Henry David Thoreau. Her mother, Abby May, was a social worker and early women's rights activist who helped shape Louisa's independent mind. Louisa herself was a feminist and abolitionist throughout her life. Louisa's father had trouble keeping students due to his innovative but controversial educational approaches. As a result, the Alcotts often struggled financially. To support her family, Louisa worked a number of odd jobs and published stories in newspapers. During the American Civil War, Louisa served as an army nurse. She wrote a series of short stories called Hospital Sketches based on her experiences. The book was successful enough to get the attention of an editor who asked her to write a story for girls. This led to Louisa's most successful novel, Little Women, which was inspired by her own life with her three sisters. The character of Jo is much like Louisa herself. She is the second oldest of her sisters, loves to write, and has an independent streak. Unlike Jo, however, Louisa never married. She traveled to Europe twice, and while there had a brief romance with Ladislas "Laddie" Wisniewski, on whom she based the character of Laurie. After a prolific career and dozens of published works, Louisa died at the age of 55. She is buried in Concord near the graves of Emerson, Hawthorne, and Thoreau on a hill known as Author's Ridge.
Okay, guys, we're going to be talking about the author, Louisa May Alcott. She was born in Pennsylvania, another U.S. state on the East Coast, back in 1832. And then she grew up near Concord, Massachusetts. So even though she was born there, her family moved up north. Massachusetts is actually north of Pennsylvania. Her father, whose name was Amos Bronson Alcott, was a philosopher and educator who belonged to the Transcendentalist movement. If you're a philosopher, you're someone who studies philosophy. You can actually take courses in college on philosophy. Not so much in high school. I think it's really kind of a college course. But he was a philosopher and educator, which kind of tells us right there that he taught school. And was also someone who belonged to the Transcendentalist movement, which Louisa did as well. So, philosopher. I don't know. Do you like philosophy? Philosophy
is kind of heavy.
Yeah, it's about the meaning of life. Why am I here? Where will I go? What am I supposed to be pursuing in life? A lot of people like to talk and think about this particular discipline in school. It can be something you major in and graduate in, and then probably have to get another degree in order to be a professor, or maybe you take your philosophy degree and then decide you're going to be a doctor. It might help you understand the way people think a little bit better.
Indeed. So, of course, we've got lots of philosophers out there. But in this particular case, her father was a philosopher and a teacher, a professor, and he was someone in the transcendentalist movement, which, simply put, I think is like going back to nature or something like that, like God is within us and all of nature and stuff like that. It's kind of complicated, so we're not going to talk about it too much here. But in any case, because he was a member of this movement, he knew a lot of influential people. So here in the next sentence it says, through her father's connections, Louisa received her education from many of the leading thinkers and writers of the time, including various people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Margaret Fuller, and Henry David Thoreau, the fella who wrote On Walden Pond there. So in any case, yes, she was, her father's daughter there, and she was able to make lots of connections there by meeting all these famous writers and thinkers of the time. So I guess she probably had a head start in her writing career because she knew these influential people.
Yeah, it looks like her parents were both very much into talking about higher ideas, probably debating what life should be like. With her father being a philosopher, she also was able to spend some time just being around people who were the leading thinkers and writers of the time, which is a huge opportunity, I would say, if you were a writer yourself. Her mother, whose name was Abby May, was a social worker. Social workers help those who are less fortunate, probably work with people who are living in poverty, working with kids perhaps who are orphans. Social workers do a lot of good work for people who can't help themselves. And then her mother was also involved with early women's rights and trying to get women the right to vote, the women the right to, have work outside the home. So her mom was an activist, so it makes sense that Louisa May Alcott was a feminist herself. If you're an activist in something, you're very much in support of some sort of policy or political movement, and you go around, talking about it, maybe protesting things that you believe should be done, protesting against stuff, protesting for things. You can be an activist in different areas, of course. And her parents really helped shape her very independent mind. She didn't need anybody else, to help her make decisions. She was very independent and always stayed that way. She was a feminist, someone who is looking for equal rights for women, and also an abolitionist throughout her life. If you're an abolitionist, we don't really have those anymore today. But back when slavery was still legal, if you can imagine, if you were an abolitionist, you were someone who really wanted to free the slaves and let the slaves live their own lives and have independence and be free.
Right. Abolitionist comes from the verb to abolish, which means to get rid of some kind of practice, like you want to get rid of the death penalty or slavery or whatever. But usually when you see the word abolitionist, they're talking about slavery.
People against slavery.
Exactly, in the United States, basically. Yeah. And here in the next paragraph, it goes on to say, Louisa's father had trouble keeping students due to his innovative but controversial educational approaches. So if you were a transcendentalist at that time, you were different from the mainstream, okay? So, of course, when he was teaching people, he probably used methods that people weren't used to. We're describing his teaching methods as being innovative, which means they're very creative, they're new, they haven't been tried before, and they actually might be quite successful. Some companies are always looking for innovative designs for a new product so that people will be interested and buy that product. But his innovative methods were also controversial, which means not everybody liked them. Some people liked them, a lot of people didn't. And of course, because of this, he was controversial. So a lot of students said, well, thank you. You're kind of interesting, but you're weird. And I'm not used to this. So I'm just going to go find a standard, traditional professor. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, sometimes people who have very different approaches are successful, and then sometimes they aren't. So as a result, the Alcotts often struggled financially. Her father just had too weird of a way about him to have a lot of students. So, kind of was difficult for them as they struggled financially or had difficulty having enough money to pay all their bills. To support her family, Louisa herself worked a number of odd jobs and published stories in newspapers. So back then, a lot of times the kids would actually go to work at a young age to try to help the family. Especially if a family had lost the father. Maybe he was either in prison or very sick or had been killed. The kids would go to work. If you have an odd job, it just doesn't mean it's weird. It just means it's not some regular job that you would go to work, in the morning and finish up in the evening. An odd job might be someone needs something, and so you go and help them take care of that. Maybe it takes a day or two. That's an odd job. Odd jobs here and there. I've had odd jobs, where I just pick up some extra editing work, or when I was younger, I used to do some yard work for money, and it wasn't a full-time job. I just did it when they needed it. That's an odd job.
Yeah, odd jobs are kind of similar to part-time jobs, but as you said, odd jobs are usually very, very temporary. You're just doing it for one time or a couple of times or something.
Yeah.
Part-time could be for several months or a couple of years or something.
More regular,
like that.
Yeah.
But odd jobs, yes, helping your neighbor mow the lawn or something, or do some translation for somebody or whatever. And of course, maybe an odd job would have been to publish a story in a newspaper. You write a story and see if they like it, and if they like it, they'll pay you for it. And of course, we still got people nowadays trying to do just that, to be freelance writers. But we're going to come back and continue talking about Louisa May Alcott in just a couple of seconds, but please stay tuned. We'll be right back after we hear from our Chinese teacher.
Hello, my name is Shelby. 今天我们要来看看写《小妇人》这本书的作者 Louisa May Alcott。在第一段的第二句 Her father belonged to the Transcendentalist movement. 他父亲是超验主义运动成员。Transcendentalism 超验主义又称为美国文艺复兴，是美国一种文学运动，兴起于1830年代，是美国思想史上一次重要的思想解放运动。Belong to 属于，后面如果加主之，就表示属于某团体。在第四句的地方 Her mother, Abby May, helped shape Louisa's independent mind. 她妈妈帮助塑造 Louisa 独立思考的能力。Help 帮助这个字后面如果加动词，可以用 help to be 或者 help 加原形动词两种语法。Shape 呢，在这里是当动词塑造的意思，也可以加介系词 up shape up 意思是一样的。在第五句 Louisa herself was a feminist and abolitionist throughout her life. Louisa 本人呢，她是女权主义者以及一名废奴主义者。Feminist 是 feminine 女性的，字尾加个 ist 表示什么什么人，变成女权主义者。Abolitionist 是由 abolish 废除加上 ist 等转变而成，变成主张废除的人。曾经他们全家曾藏匿一个逃亡的奴隶1个星期哦。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue with our lesson. We're talking about the life and times of Louisa May Alcott. Her father was a transcendentalist, and her mother was a feminist. And, of course, she had a very progressive beginning there. I guess her parents probably encouraged her to be independent and not be traditional and just marry some rich guy and be an obedient housewife. No, she was going to change the world, so she became a writer. And somebody liked her writing or something, so they asked her to write a story about a story for girls, which we're going to get to in a second, and that's how our featured novel, Little Women, was born.
That's right. So we were talking about some of the odd jobs that she had. She was able to publish some stories in newspapers. And during the American Civil War, we just call it the Civil War, Louisa served as an army nurse. I just was reading about her life. She served for about 6 weeks on the lines, helping some of those injured soldiers. That would be tough work. You're seeing a lot of awful things. And back then, medicine hadn't progressed very far. So there were a lot of people who were getting, limbs cut off right there. And she was trying to help them survive the trauma. It was a tough gig. Gig is a job. She wrote a series of short stories that she called hospital sketches based on her experiences. So a sketch, when I see the word sketch, I typically think of someone drawing on a piece of paper, quickly. It's sort of a rough drawing or unfinished drawing, but can also be a written account, a description of something that gives you basic details. So she wanted to put these down in writing, some of the experiences she had working as an army nurse. Well, the book was successful enough to get the attention of an editor. Editors are the people that you give them your manuscript that you've written, and they decide whether the company's going to publish it or not. So this editor asked her to write a story for girls. And that's when she started on this track or trail of writing these books. Little Women, she wrote Little Men, Joe's Boys. Those are all three that I read. They're really, really good. So this led to, if something leads to something, it starts somewhere, and then, in the future it can develop into something else. This led to her most successful novel, Little Women, which was inspired by her own life with her 3 sisters. She kind of based the character of Jo on herself, although we'll find out Louisa didn't ever marry. She remained single, I think on purpose. I think she wanted the freedom to do what she wanted. But in the book and in the movie, you'll find out Jo does get married, but Louisa herself did not.
Right, so led to, again, as you said, is the past tense of lead to, just goes in that direction or makes something happen. So, of course, being asked to write a story for girls led to her writing her successful novel, Little Women. And the character of Jo is much like Louisa herself. She is the second oldest of her sisters, loves to write, and has an independent streak. So here we've got the word streak, which kind of means it's describing your personality traits. Like you could describe your younger brother as having a lazy streak. Boy, he doesn't do anything. He sleeps late in the morning. He doesn't do his homework. He's got a lazy streak. That is kind of his personality.
Yeah, we also use it to talk about a color that's different than the color surrounding it. For example, you might have seen someone who has a streak of gray hair. The rest of their hair perhaps is black, but they've got this one part that's gray. Or we also use it as a verb to talk about people who take off all their clothes and go running naked in front of other people.
Streakers.
Yeah, streakers. He's streaking. But here it just means a little bit of that thrown in with the rest of something else. So, yeah, an independent streak. They might not be completely independent, but a little part of them is. So, unlike Jo, however, Louisa never married. I wanted to mention, you can pronounce this name Louisa with a S sound or Z. They're both correct. Louisa, both correct. She traveled to Europe twice, and while there had a brief romance with a guy that has a very difficult name to pronounce. He's Polish. We know that because of the ski at the end of his last name, but it's Ladislas Wisniewski. She called him Laddie, or people called him Laddie. That was his nickname. And she based the character of Laurie from Little Women on this guy who was real and somebody that she had a little romance with.
Indeed. So I guess he's Polish here with that name. And of course, Polish people are pretty cool because they got those great sausages. So that was fortunate for her. They probably had some great meals when they were having their relationship there. And after a prolific career and dozens of published works, Louisa died at the age of 55, which sounds pretty young to me. Maybe that was okay or that was normal for the time there, but still 55 sounds kind of young here.
She had a lot of chronic health problems as she got older. Yeah, chronic health problems means they just never get better, and they just go on and on and on. Yeah, so 55 back then was still pretty young, I think, but yeah, it's kind of sad.
She could have lived longer for sure. We wish she had, but we're describing her career as being very prolific.
Oh, she had a stroke. That's what killed her.
Okay, she had a stroke, but still, before that happened, her career was prolific, which means she produced a lot of stuff. She wrote lots and lots of books, so it would take you a long time to read everything she wrote. She was quite productive. She was prolific. And again, she died when she was 55, and she is buried in Concord near the graves of Emerson, Hawthorne, and Thoreau on a hill known as Author's Ridge. Okay, so it's traditional in Western societies and in other societies in the world to bury your dead. If you bury something, you put it in the ground. And oftentimes, of course, if you're interested in people who lived in the past, you try to find the cemetery where somebody is buried. A lot of people do that when they go to California. They like to go to the cemeteries where old actors and actresses are buried. They're buried in various cemeteries out there. In this particular case, though, she's buried in Concord, which I think was a major town in the Revolutionary War.
It was, yeah.
Lexington and Concord were all taught about that in grade school, but that's where she is buried. That's where her grave is.
Yeah, they would often do that. They'd put a lot of the famous people together, but she is surrounded by some other really famous authors, Emerson, Hawthorne, Thoreau, on a hill known as Author's Ridge. So it sounds like there were several authors who had been buried in the same area. It's a pretty famous site. I think it's Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, too, which is kind of a fun name. But yeah, cool. I love to go and look through old cemeteries to see what famous people I come across. It just gives you kind of this cool feeling. Anyway.
Or you can look for your dead ancestors. I did that once with my family back in when I was in high school. We looked in cemeteries in New York State and New Jersey.
Did you find any of them?
Some, but I don't remember. Of course, that was a long time ago. But in any case, that's the author of our featured novel for this month. And next time, of course, we're going to go back to the story Little Women and talk about some of the ideas. But that's all we have to talk about for today. So let's turn things over now to our Chinese teacher.
我们看这一段的最后一句 The character of Joel is much like Louisa herself, has an independent streak. Joel 像 Louisa 本身拥有独立的特质 Be like somebody or something, like 像介系词在 like 前面加 much 修饰的话表示像极了 Has an independent streak, independent 独立的 Streak 呢是当名词使用条文 A dirty streak on the windows 或者第二个特点她固执的性格很难相处 Her stubborn streak makes her difficult to get along 最后一段第二行的后面逗点之后 On whom she based the character of Laurie Louisa 以她为原型创造出老李的角色这个呢是一个形容词子句关系代名词 whom 指的就是先行词 Lottie Winooski 动词词组 base something on something 以什么为基础现在当形容词子句我们就将后面的 on something 搬到子句的前面而这个受词就是先行词 Lottie 这个人所以呢我们用关系代名词 who 接在介系词 on 的后面变成了 on whom 在第三行After a prolific career and dozens of published works, Louisa died at the age of 55. 度过多产的职涯和大量的作品之后 Louisa 死于55岁 prolific 多产的，作品丰富的。Dozen 是计量单位，一打，但是 dozens of 表示许多。Louisa 一生的作品非常丰富，是一个有着先进思想的作家哦。以上是今天的讲解，谢谢收听。
That brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Thanks for joining us, and make sure you join us again next time when we wrap up our literature unit for the month of January. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.